Tonight on ABC News Live Prime, as the U.S. and Israel continue with relentless airstrikes hitting deeper into Iranian territory, a major shakeup inside the Trump administration. The president fires Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. The president's decision comes after 2 blistering days of hearings on Capitol Hill for Noem. A source tells ABC News the president was upset with multiple leadership failures, including her handling of those 2 deadly shootings of American citizens in Minneapolis, Renee Good and Alex Preddy. Noem refused to apologize for labeling both domestic terrorists. Today, the president wasted no time naming a replacement. And the breaking developments in the war with Iran. The U.S. and Israel targeting Iran's mobile missile launchers. The Israeli military says video shows one of its fighters shooting down an Iranian jet, but Iran still shows its ability to retaliate, their missiles avoiding interceptors, hitting an oil facility in Bahrain and targeting an airport in Azerbaijan. Also, the first flights carrying Americans are arriving back in the U.S., passengers stepping off of a plane at JFK. Also tonight, Israel makes incursions into southern Lebanon once again, warning hundreds of thousands to move north immediately. Israel attempts to deal a death blow to Hezbollah, Iran's proxy in the region. Our Matt Rivers reports from Beirut. And today we sit down with Energy Secretary Wright, asking him how much Americans can soon expect to pay for a gallon of gas. Also tonight, we talk to part of the cast and creative team behind the film Sinners, which has received 16 Academy Award nominations. Director Ryan Coogler, actor Michael B. Jordan, and costume designer Ruth Carter explain the magic that made the movie a hit.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We have extensive coverage of the war in Iran and escalating conflicts across the Middle East. But first, we begin with President Trump firing DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, one of the most high-profile members of President Trump's cabinet. Noem's leadership was called into question by both Democrats and Republicans in congressional hearings this week. The president announced today that Oklahoma Republican Senator Mark Wayne Mullen will take over the Department of Homeland Security. ABC News has now learned that Noem was told of the news by President Trump just moments before she was set to deliver a speech in Nashville. According to an administration source, the president was frustrated and fired her due to unfortunate leadership failures, among other things. Noem is now the first cabinet official fired from the second Trump administration. Here's Rachel Scott leading us off.
She was one of the most high-profile members of the cabinet. And tonight, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is out, fired by President Trump, the first major shakeup of his second term.
Today they're letting me roll with them.
Noem's tenure defined by controversy and flashy photo ops. For the president, a $220 million taxpayer-funded ad campaign may have been the last straw.
I'm Kristi Noem.
The secretary seen galloping through Mount Rushmore.
Anyone who searches for freedom can always find a home here.
Tuesday, Republican Senator John Kennedy grilling Noem about taxpayers paying for that campaign.
The president approved ahead of time you spending $220 million running TV ads across the country in which you are featured prominently.
Yes, sir. We went through the legal processes, did it correctly.
Did the president
worked
know
with
you were going
OMB.
to do this?
Yes.
He did?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Kennedy deeply skeptical.
That's not the president of the United States I know. And in fact, after the hearing, the president of the United States called me. I'm going to put it this way. His recollection and her recollection are different.
Tonight, administration sources telling me Noem's ouster was the culmination of her many unfortunate leadership failures. Flashpoints laid bare this week in 2 bruising congressional hearings. Noem was pressed on the chaos in Minnesota. Federal officers killing protesters Alex Preddy and Renee Good. Noem quickly characterizing the victims as domestic terrorists just hours after they were shot dead.
That is the definition of domestic terrorism.
Tuesday, the secretary refused to apologize.
Do you want to apologize for that characterization that they were domestic terrorists?
I will continue every day to get up and to work hard to give everybody factual information.
Noem was also asked to explain her relationship with her powerful top aide, Corey Lewandowski, President Trump's former campaign manager, whose official role was a special government employee.
Secretary Noem, at any time during your tenure as Director of Department of Homeland Security, have you had sexual relations with Corey Lewandowski?
Mr. Chairman, I am shocked that we're going down and peddling tabloid garbage in this committee today.
Noem even called to task for writing in her book that she shot and killed her family's rambunctious puppy.
A 14-month-old dog is basically a teenager in dog years. You decided to kill that dog because you had not invested the appropriate time in training, and then you have the audacity to go into a book and say it's a leadership lesson about tough choices.
Today, President Trump announcing on social media that Noem was out. Sources tell us he called to inform her just minutes before she took the stage at a speech in Nashville. The president's pick to replace Noem, Oklahoma Senator Mark Wayne Mullen. I spoke to him on the Capitol steps.
Is there any learning lessons that you have picked up from Noem in the ways in which you want to lead the agency a little bit differently?
Christy is a friend. She was tasked to do a very difficult job, and I think she has performed the best she can do underneath the circumstances.
Rachel, what's next for the Oklahoma senator's confirmation process?
Well, Lindsay, Senator Mullen will still have to go through the traditional confirmation process here on Capitol Hill, something that he is very familiar with. But Republicans are looking to move forward with this very quickly because, of course, we are still in a partial government shutdown over that DHS funding. And tonight he is getting some bipartisan support. Democratic Senator John Fetterman says he plans to support Senator Mullen. Lindsay.
Rachel Scott from the Hill for us. Thanks so much, Rachel. There are also breaking developments in the war in Iran. The U.S. and Israel have ramped up attacks targeting Iran's mobile missile launchers. Iran is still fighting back, striking an oil facility in Bahrain. We're standing by to talk with the Energy Secretary, the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, and our team throughout the region. But we start with our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, in Tel Aviv tonight.
The US and Israel unleashing new waves of devastating attacks on Iran tonight, ramping up strikes against the regime. And late today, President Trump saying the operation is far ahead of schedule.
We're destroying more of Iran's missiles and drone capability every single hour, knocking them out like nobody thought was possible.
The president urging regime change and telling our John Karl that he should have a role in picking Iran's next supreme leader and saying the Ayatollah Khamenei's son, Mujtaba, is not an acceptable option.
I'm once again calling on all members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the military and the police to lay down their arms. They're only going to be killed. And now is the time to stand up for the Iranian people and help take back your country.
And tonight, Secretary Pete Hegseth saying the amount of firepower over Iran is about to surge dramatically.
Iran is hoping that we cannot sustain this, which is a really bad miscalculation for the IRGC in Iran.
Israel releasing video of a mid-air dogfight over Iran. The IDF saying an Israeli F-35 stealth fighter shot down an Iranian warplane, marking the first ever confirmed air-to-air takedown by an F-35. US B-52 bombers striking Iranian ballistic missile and command and control facilities. And tonight, the war widening. Israel fighting on two fronts, striking Iran and Lebanon, pounding Beirut. Our Matt Rivers is there.
It sounds like incoming. Yeah, there's the explosion, series of explosions there. That's the latest Israeli airstrike. Hundreds of thousands of people were warned by the Israeli military to evacuate from there earlier today in advance of those airstrikes that we just heard.
But Iran's still striking back, today releasing video claiming to show the launch of a missile with multiple warheads. Dramatic video posted online capturing massive explosions as Iranian missiles slammed into an oil refinery in Bahrain. Air defense systems firing, but missing the missiles. No injuries reported. And for the first time since this war erupted, Azerbaijan says it was targeted by two Iranian drones, one landing near a school. Another hitting an airport, causing injuries. Iran denies attacking the country. And with more US troops heading to the region, a new warning from Iran tonight, saying thousands will be killed if the US dares launch a ground offensive. One Iranian official saying, "We're waiting for you." Thousands of Americans still struggling to escape the war-torn region. The first direct flight from Dubai arriving in New York today. The State Department confirming the first charter flights took off, and they're surging additional flights and ground transport to help get Americans out. 25,000 flights have been cancelled since the war began. Officials say at least 20,000 Americans have already returned to the US since Saturday. At least 10,000 helped by the task force.
Then the war started.
Ryan Rivera Cabrera, a college student from Boston, was trapped in Dubai after the war broke out, telling ABC News the US government did very little to help him.
Really, every time we contact a federal resource, it would just say to shelter in place and, aim to find a commercial flight.
Cabrera saying he didn't feel safe until he landed in New York today.
I didn't feel relief until the wheels started running on the floor just a few hours ago. That's when I finally was able to take a sigh of, relief.
We saw a lot of missiles.
Charles Lowe from New Jersey, also on that flight back to the US, saying he saw missiles flying over his head in Dubai.
It's not usual to have missiles intercepted above your head.
How difficult was it to get a flight out there?
Impossible.
Ian Pannell joins us once again from Tel Aviv. Ian, what are U.S. officials and Israelis saying about the next stage in this war?
Yeah, Lindsay, I think overall they're giving this very clear impression that at the moment we're in some kind of phase one, but they're both talking about an escalation, and given the level of bombing, it's hard to see exactly how that's conducted, and also the broad range of strikes. You've got Secretary Hegseth warning that the war is about to surge dramatically. And then today we heard from Israel's Chief of Staff, who also said that strikes are going to ramp up in what he calls phase two of this operation. Lindsay?
Ian Pannell from Tel Aviv for us. Thanks so much, Ian. ABC News has learned that more than a dozen Iranian underground missile bases have been hit since the start of the war. And as the conflict wears on, there are concerns over just how much this will cost American taxpayers. Our chief global affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz, reports.
Tonight, the U.S. and Israel pummeling Iranian missile bases deep underground. ABC News verifying that 13 of the underground facilities have been damaged or destroyed. The Israeli Army Chief of Staff claiming 60% of the launchers have now been taken out. But for American taxpayers, it's coming with a steep price tag. One estimate by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a bipartisan think tank, puts the cost at $3.7 billion for the first 100 hours alone. That's more than $891 million per day. The Pentagon's top policy official, however, unable or unwilling to put a price tag on the war when pressed by members of Congress.
Okay, and what about cost? Can you say how much this will cost the American people?
I'll get back to you, ma'am. I can't give you an answer at this point.
But even though costly, late today, the Pentagon making the case that it's working, and there has been a major drop in retaliatory strikes by Iran.
Ballistic missile attacks have decreased by 90% since day one. Drone attacks have decreased by 83% since day one.
6 American soldiers have been killed so far in this war, including 2 just identified, 45-year-old Major Jeffrey O'Brien from Iowa and 54-year-old Chief Warrant Officer 3 Robert Marzan from California. They were killed in a drone strike at a tactical operations center in Kuwait.
Our thanks to Martha Raddatz. For more now, we're joined in studio by Energy Secretary Chris Wright. Thank you so much for your time, Secretary. Really appreciate you joining us. You presided over the UN Security Council session today in New York, speaking out against Iran's brutal regime and talking about the need for energy, saying that energy is life. Here in the U.S., the national average for a gallon of gas is $3.26. That's up 28 cents in the past week, according to Gas Buddy. You've said that higher energy costs are, quote, a small price to pay if it means the removal of the Iranian regime. But just so the American at home knows, how long can we expect to pay higher prices at the pump?
It's brief. It's very temporary. This is a 47-year-long conflict with Iran that finally will come to an end in the next few weeks. We don't know the exact length, but pretty temporary,
Of course, many people know that there are security concerns right now in the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump has suggested that perhaps the U.S. Navy could escort ships through. Is there a timeline for that?
No specific timeline, but not far away. I mean, our military right now is focused entirely on degrading Iran's ability to terrorize Americans and its neighbors. So rockets, launchers, drones. We are knocking down Iran's ability to cause trouble in the neighborhood. So that's the focus right now. But before long, we'll be able to get ship traffic flowing out of the Strait of Hormuz again.
You've talked to shipping companies about the possibility of offering them insurance that would be backed by the United States government. Have those companies suggested that they might go forward with that if they had that assurance?
Not today. Not today. There is commercial insurance markets. What we're going to do is backstop or reinsure existing commercial markets, but when it's time. Right now, the biggest issue is just physical security. You don't want to run a large tanker ship through the Strait of Hormuz today, but that'll change in the not too distant future.
How concerned are you about the safety of the Strait of Hormuz today?
Oh, today it's in a very active conflict zone, and Iran is very focused on fire. They've hit a number of tankers. Iran is a little caged lion right now, and they're fearful that their ability to terrorize their neighbors and kill Americans is going to come to an end soon. So it's a conflict zone right now, but again, that's quite a temporary event.
Just today, Iran state media reported that a U.S. tanker was hit in the northern Gulf. Can you confirm that?
I have not heard that news today, actually. But again, I think the key thing to look at is we're in a conflict today that'll be quite temporary. We've had 47 years where Iran, they were shooting tanker ships 40 years ago. They have been a menace in that region, and that region is a major supplier of energy. Imagine the flow of energy when Iran is no longer a menace. Quickly after this conflict, energy prices will be back down to where they were before. And now we've got a long road ahead where energy prices will have more downward pressure.
Have you spoken with the president about oil costs in particular?
Oh, absolutely.
And can you share anything of what that conversation looks like? Because as you know, many Americans are feeling the impact specifically with gas prices in the midst of the war.
Oh, the president's passionate about this. Look, he got elected to bring common sense back to Washington, D.C. And one of the worst things Washington, D.C. did during the Biden administration, drive up electricity prices 30%. No increase in electricity production, just higher prices. Drove gasoline prices up dramatically. Gasoline prices today, in the midst of this conflict, are 1/3 lower than they were in the middle of the Biden administration. And natural gas prices today are half what they were in the middle of the Biden administration. So yes, they're more than they were a month or two ago, more than we'd like them to be, but dramatically lower than the previous administration. And that's because America is the biggest producer of oil on the world by far, and the largest producer of natural gas, and both are growing. We want to insulate our citizens as much as we can from energy markets, bring jobs, reindustrialization, and opportunity to the United States. But we got to fix a long-term problem that everyone wanted to just kick the can down the road. President Trump's like, time to end a 47-year conflict.
Just one more question on the oil. How much higher do you think that it could go?
Oh, I don't know. Markets set that. But there's meaningful oil supply in the world. Again, U.S. at very record production right now. There's a lot of floating storage of oil around the world that's easily accessible. We have significant oil stores in the United States and our Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Our allies that we've been coordinating with have sent excess oil out in storage around the world. The world is at absolutely zero risk of running out of oil or energy through this conflict, but we are suffering short-term price dislocation. That'll be over soon.
Any reaction to President Trump's termination of Kristi Noem?
Kristi is a hard-working member of that team. I'm taken back to how quickly she and the president closed the border. Just an amazing driver of crime in the United States is just this unchecked flow of migrants. Last year in 2025, we had the largest drop in annual murders ever in U.S. history to a very low level right now. So closing the border quickly, focusing on law enforcement, tremendous success record.
I was told by a little bird that you may have some news to break today, and so I just want to give you that opportunity to say that if that.
Yeah, so back to your question about oil. We need to get oil on the market in the short term. In the long term, supplies are abundant. There's no worries there. But as oil gets bid up a little bit because of those constraints coming out of the Strait of Hormuz, we're taking a short-term action to say all this floating Russian oil storage that's around southern Asia, it's China just backed up. China does not treat their suppliers well. So there's a bunch of floating barrels just sitting there. We've reached out to our friends in India and said, buy that oil, bring it into your refineries. That pulls stored oil immediately into Indian refineries and releases the pressure on other refineries around the world to buy oil that they're no longer competing with the Indians for in that marketplace. So we have a number of measures like that that are short-term and temporary. This is no change in policy towards Russia. This is a very brief change in policy just to keep oil prices down a little bit better than we could otherwise.
Secretary Chris Wright, we so appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay.
For more now, we're joined by the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, Representative Adam Smith of Washington State. Thank you so much for joining us. We just heard from the Energy Secretary, who said pain at the pump will be temporary as the conflict will come to an end in the next few weeks. Secretary Hegseth, meanwhile, said that the war is about to surge dramatically. What's your expectation as far as the length of this war?
We really don't know. And it's in part because the goals are not clear and the means to achieve those goals are not clear. Broadly speaking, they want to degrade Iran's ability to wage war, their missile ability, their proxy ability. And so they're working on that. But how far is it going to have to be degraded before success is declared? I mean, keep in mind, Israel and Iran were in a 12-day war less than a year ago, in which Israel did substantial damage to Iran's ability to inflict pain on the region. They also went after Hezbollah and Hamas and other groups. The Assad regime fell in Syria, all reducing Iran's ability for malevolent behavior in the region. How much more do you have to reduce it, and at what cost? And when it's done, you know, we're not necessarily ending this long-term conflict with Iran because there doesn't seem to be a particular plan to change the regime and put a regime in that is more likely to take a different path.
You just mentioned at what cost, and I do want to ask, how concerned are you about the cost, not only with regard to dollars, but potential lives?
Yeah, I'm very concerned about both, and the disruption to the Middle East and the disruption to the global economy. You saw the impact it had on Americans who are in the region desperately trying to get home. Look, I mean, President Trump has been very aggressive about using the military, certainly in Iran, but we waged a 3.5-month war against Yemen. The boat strikes in Latin America are ongoing. We've bombed Nigeria. There's a cost to that, both in terms of money and the impact it has on the defense budget and our ability to meet our national security needs, and also in disruption. And certainly this is the most disruptive war in the Middle East that we've seen in a couple generations. So I think that cost is going to be high, and thus far the administration hasn't been completely transparent about what that cost is.
We know that the war powers vote failed in the House today after it failed in the Senate yesterday. If the conflict does go on beyond 90 days, under the War Powers Act, troops must come home. Will Congress vote to authorize force?
Yeah, 60 days, actually, not 90. Yeah, it's the way it's supposed to work. I don't see this president paying attention to that law. Many of us will continue to put pressure on Congress to have a vote on whether or not this war should continue and to stick to the Constitution that says the war shouldn't be allowed to go forward without congressional authorization. But no, I don't see them making a dramatic change in 60 days. And I think the next couple of weeks are going to be crucial.
Is it 60 to 90? That's my understanding, that you have the potential to go until 90 days.
Yeah, my understanding was that at the 60-day point, you then had to either say that hostilities had ceased or get congressional approval. But, you know, I'll leave that to the lawyers. At any rate, yeah, at some point under the War Powers Resolution, or War Powers Act that was passed into law in the 1970s, congressional approval is required. But the president hasn't really been following the Constitution or the law to date, so I don't expect him to 60 or 90 days from now.
What's your biggest concern as we sit here tonight?
My biggest concern in the short term is the unexpected, the substantial loss of life in the region, massive disruptions. We already lost 6 service members in this fight. Might we lose more? My biggest concern is for the lives of our service members. In terms of broader policy, my biggest concern is that we fight this for 4, 6 weeks, 8 weeks maybe. Iran is degraded. The regime's still in place. Everything goes back down. And then Iran just stays and continues to be what they were before. So at great expense, we haven't made progress towards the ultimate goal. President Trump is fond of saying, Iran started this war, I'm just ending it. He's not really ending it. President Trump is escalating it. Whether or not that ends it at some point, I don't know. But the one thing we do know Right now, this is the most dramatic escalation in the conflict between Iran and U.S. that we've ever seen.
And just in the last few seconds before you go, of course, you saw the news about the termination of Kristi Noem. Your reaction to the direction of the agency and the choice of Senator Mark Wayne Mullen?
Yeah, I think the problem here is not just Kristi Noem. These are Donald Trump's policies that are violating the rights of Americans all across the country. We saw Minneapolis, 2 American citizens killed by ICE agents, effectively murdered. We've seen the civil rights violated, people, dragged out of cars, homes invaded without warrants. That's the problem. Now, Kristi Noem had a unique way of implementing that. Many of the things she did were problematic, but the policies are the problem. So I think Congress still needs to pass laws to rein in what ICE is doing and protect the rights of all Americans. Yes, we need immigration enforcement, and I give the president credit for having secured the border, but now he is violating the rights of Americans on a day in and day out basis. Congress should act to regulate that and rein in the abuses that ICE is raining down upon us.
Democratic Congressman Adam Smith, we thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
House Republican leaders have asked Representative Tony Gonzalez to withdraw from his race for re-election. Gonzalez faces a House ethics investigation into an affair with a former aide who subsequently died by suicide. Gonzalez on Wednesday admitted to the relationship, saying he made a mistake. The representative is scheduled for a May runoff election for Texas's 23rd congressional district. And still ahead, pop star Britney Spears arrested in California, what she's accused of doing. And Wall Street on edge. Stocks plunge as gas prices continue to climb. Those news updates and more. But next, as the conflict in Iran intensifies, Israel has launched an attack on another one of its enemies, Hezbollah, in Lebanon. We have the latest on that turmoil. Stay with us. Welcome back. It is no surprise the conflict in the Middle East has brought the fight to Lebanon, where Hezbollah, a proxy of the Iranian regime, has long used the missiles and drones that they've received from Iran to fight Israel. Hezbollah was severely weakened in 2024 when an Israeli bombing campaign in southern Lebanon killed many of Hezbollah's leaders and depleted their stockpile of munitions. Israel renewed attacks on southern Lebanon this week, appearing to further take advantage of a crippled Hezbollah. Our Matt Rivers reports now from Beirut.
Iran and its proxies have attacked at least 11 countries in the past week, widening a war that began with the U.S.-Israeli attacks. But now Israel itself is seizing on an opportunity to try and deal a death blow to another of its enemies, Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah has long been Iran's proxy combatants in Lebanon.
We're very upset about this. We're not used to this kind of stuff. I think nobody's safe now in the Middle East. We've seen up to 2 days ago, UAE was the safest country in the world. Now the entire Middle East
getting hit every night.
Yeah, so now I think nobody's safe.
The consequences for Lebanon's civilians have been severe. Israeli airstrikes targeting what it describes as Hezbollah infrastructure have hit residential neighborhoods in Beirut's southern suburbs, in Dahia, and in the south of the country. Dozens of Lebanese civilians have been killed so far and many more wounded in recent days. Its already fragile economy, burdened by years of financial crisis and infrastructure challenges, the country now faces shortages of shelter, food, and medical services. We traveled to a school called Bir Hassan Technical College, where we met families fleeing the chaos.
So between the 3 or 4 buildings here, there's roughly 2,000 people now living here. And what really strikes me is that you can hear right now the constant buzz of Israeli drones overhead. And it was just last night that just 500 meters from here, there was an airstrike.
Inside, life goes on. Daily prayers made, jokes between friends. This former classroom, once a place of learning, now offering safe harbor. The Jawad family have 2 young children, 1 and 5, and traveled for 3 days before arriving at Bir Hassan after they say Hezbollah urged them to evacuate. For decades, Lebanon has lived under the shadow of tensions with Israel and Hezbollah. the people of Lebanon, hostages in the tensions which restarted most recently in September of 2024, when explosives packed into pagers and walkie-talkies detonated over a 2-day period. Our Marcus Moore standing just feet from one such explosion.
We just heard a loud explosion.
The operation killed dozens of Hezbollah adherents, but also injured 4,000 civilians, according to the Lebanese government. Less than 2 weeks later, Israel invaded southern Lebanon, launching an aerial bombing campaign against Hezbollah from which it never recovered. And just since last weekend, the danger has resulted in 77 people killed, according to the Lebanese Ministry of Public Health, and has forced more mass displacement. According to United Nations agencies, more than 30,000 Lebanese have fled their homes, seeking shelter in schools like Bir Hassan. Now Hezbollah has formally entered the fray, launching missiles and drones into northern Israel in what it says is retaliation for Iran's losses. This has prompted a swift and severe response from Israel with airstrikes and limited ground operations in southern Lebanon. As families move northward, away from border regions and bombardment zones, many more are expected to be displaced if fighting continues. A highly unusual warning from the Israelis for entire neighborhoods to evacuate was released today, urging the hundreds of thousands of residents of Dahia, a stronghold of Hezbollah, to, quote, save your lives and evacuate your homes immediately. You are prohibited from heading south. Any southward movement could endanger your lives. We will inform you of the appropriate time to return to your homes. The warning prompting speculation and fear that Israel could carry out massive airstrikes soon.
It seems to me that the Israelis are trying to get the civilian population out of the way because they intend to unleash the full fury of their air force on Hezbollah. They intend to basically dismantle and destroy as much of Hezbollah's infrastructure with as little complication from the presence of civilians as possible.
Beyond the physical toll, the war has deepened political fissures within Lebanon. The government in Beirut has openly condemned Hezbollah's retaliation, calling its act unauthorized and illegal, and has demanded the group hand over its weapons. In Lebanon, civilians are bracing for more. And as the Iran war spreads, Lebanon's people, weary from previous conflicts, find themselves once again in the crossfire, displaced, mourning losses, and watching their nation's fragile stability unravel.
What do you hope happens next here? What will you do?
بتأمل إنه أرجع على بيتي ويكون الوضع أحلى من هيك وحياة مستمرة ونرجع أشغالنا وأرزاقنا وبيوتنا ما بدناش إلا هيك وبدنا نعيش بأمان مش
So many share that similar hope. Matt, our thanks to you. Coming up after the Supreme Court blow, President Trump is facing another legal challenge over his global tariffs, and pop star Britney Spears is arrested. We have those details. Welcome back to Prime. Here's a look at the stories making headlines right now. Overseas, the U.S. and Israel's airstrikes on Iran continue to escalate. The Israeli military released a new video showing one of its fighters shooting down an Iranian jet. Iran retaliated, hitting an oil facility in Bahrain. The State Department announced it has suspended all operations at the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait, the first suspension of operations at a U.S. embassy since the conflict started. As the war with Iran has intensified, oil prices continue to climb. Crude oil prices topped $79 today, hitting their highest level since July of 2024. Stocks have also plunged. The Dow Jones is down by 1,000 points, while the S&P dropped 1.2%. More than 20 states have filed a lawsuit over President Trump's new global tariffs after the Supreme Court struck down the tariffs he imposed last year under an emergency powers law. Trump imposed the import taxes under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 to enforce the tariffs. The new lawsuit is led by attorneys general from Oregon, Arizona, California, and New York, arguing that Trump is overstepping his power by using the section of the act which is only for specific circumstances. And coming up, as the war in Iran continues, we look at the financial and human cost of previous U.S.-involved wars by the numbers. And the road to the Oscars continues. We sit down with Ryan Coogler, Michael B. Jordan, and the other creatives behind the blockbuster film Sinners. They peel back the curtain on their historic 16 nominations. As our Martha Raddatz reported earlier, the war in Iran will potentially cost the U.S. hundreds of millions of dollars a day. Let's take a look at the financial and human cost of previous U.S.-involved wars by the numbers. $2.3 trillion. That was the financial impact of the Afghanistan war that launched in 2001, just weeks after the 9/11 attacks, and ended 20 years later. The human cost of that war, more than 6,000 American military personnel and DoD contractors were killed, and at least 46,000 Afghan civilians died in the conflict. Then there is the Iraq War from 2003 to 2011. The U.S.-led invasion authorized to destroy alleged weapons of mass destruction and remove Saddam Hussein from power cost the U.S. more than $800 billion through 2012. But when you account long-term costs such as medical care for veterans and other related expenses, the cost is nearly $2 trillion. The human cost of the Iraq War, roughly 5,000 U.S. and allied lives were lost, and nearly 100,000 Iraqis were killed in the conflict. Still ahead, the terrifying moment when a bunk bed collapsed, trapping a child in the bottom bed. And we're on the road to the Oscars. We take a look at Ryan Coogler's Sinners, the most nominated film in Oscars history. Police officers make an arrest and finish a DoorDash delivery. NBA's Jason Tatum returns, and a terrifying moment caught on tape as a bunk bed gives way. These stories and more in tonight's rundown. What began as a routine traffic stop quickly turned into a moment of community policing in action. An officer observed a white Toyota Prius traveling on the wrong side of the roadway and conducted a traffic stop. During the interaction, the driver informed the officer she did not have a valid driver's license and was working to complete a DoorDash delivery. When the driver explained they still had a delivery waiting for a hungry customer, the officer stepped in and helped complete the delivery. Video captured the terrifying moments when a bunk bed collapsed at a home in Texas. The scary footage shows the top bunk bed slats collapsing the mattress, and a young girl falls onto the bottom bed. The young girl frees her brother trapped underneath the mattress, and their grandmother rushes in to help the children. Aurora Price shared the video on TikTok and says she followed all the instructions when she put it together for her children. Britney Spears was arrested in California, with law enforcement sources confirming to ABC News the arrest was for suspicion of driving under the influence of a combination of alcohol and drugs after she showed signs of impairment and submitted to a series of field sobriety tests. A representative for Spears shared a statement with ABC News following the singer's arrest, saying in part, Britney is going to take the right steps and comply with the law, and hopefully this can be the first step in long overdue change that needs to occur in Britney's life. Spears is slated to appear in court on May 4th. According to arrest records. Boston Celtics superstar Jason Tatum is expected to make his NBA season debut against the Dallas Mavericks on Friday night at TD Garden, according to ESPN sources. Tatum's return comes less than 10 months after tearing his right Achilles tendon in Game 4 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the New York Knicks. The six-time All-Star and two-time Olympic gold medal winner is expected to inform the Celtics of his final decision ahead of Friday's game. A traffic call in Cobb County, Georgia, turned into an unexpected funny encounter when officers responded to reports of a turkey blocking the road. The turkey was quickly identified as Henry and was clearly in a foul mood. Officers tried to encourage Henry to clear the roadway, but the turkey appeared to have other plans and was not particularly friendly with the officer trying to help move him along. Eventually, Henry relented and moved out of the road. Fortunately, no human or bird injuries were reported. We're just over a week away from Hollywood's biggest night. More presenters were just announced for the annual awards ceremony. Will Arnett, Priyanka Chopra Jonas, Robert Downey Jr., Anne Hathaway, Paul Mescal, and Gwyneth Paltrow will all present at the 98th Oscars in Hollywood and will be hosted by the hilarious Conan O'Brien. Ryan Coogler's musical horror Sinners is breaking records before the Academy Awards ceremony even begins. For the first time, the film has garnered 16 nominations. That's the most in Oscars history. It's the Jim Crow-era vampire film that everyone's talking about this awards season. Take a look.
There are legends of people with the gift of making music so true.
Ryan Coogler's Jim Crow-era vampire movie Sinners makes Academy Awards history.
I'm very reactive as a writer to things that are around me. I internalize it and try to make something that I feel I would want to see, you know?
I ain't ever seen no demons.
For the first time, a single film has garnered 16 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director for Coogler, who also wrote and produced this original story.
A big inspiration for this movie is somebody who passed away, you know, going on 11 years ago, my Uncle James.
Surpassing the previous record of 14 held by La La Land, Titanic, and All About Eve.
It's going to be a bumpy night.
Coogler assembled the perfect cast and crew, including Best Actor nominee Michael B. Jordan, who leads the cast, playing twins Smoke and Stack Moore.
Yeah, that excited me. It had me anxious, a little nervous too, but it was the good nerves. It's the kind of nerves that you get when you know you have something that, you know, it's a swing. It's a creative swing.
Set in 1932, the brothers returned to their Mississippi hometown to open a juke joint, only to confront sinister and supernatural forces.
That ain't your brother.
What's also turning heads this year are the behind-the-scenes categories.
Sinners.
The first woman of color to receive a headlining nomination for achievement in cinematography.
Here we have Autumn Durald Arkapaw, who has been a profound piece of Ryan Coogler's success.
I think mostly it means the world because of the team I made the film with, because Ryan is always giving opportunities to women of color.
Autumn Durald Arkapaw is also the first woman to ever shoot on IMAX 65mm and Ultra Panavision.
When I'm on set doing my job, I see myself reflected around me, this being one of them. And it makes me feel great because I'm making it with family and a community, and so it feels right that I would be recognized in this way.
A category dominated by men, Arkapaw certainly feels the weight of this recognition. She's the fourth woman to ever be nominated, and no woman has ever taken home the Oscar for cinematography.
I think that's important for women that aren't always being seen as much on, in the film business, because we're usually a minority.
We will make beautiful music.
Horror films and musicals are the two genres that walk in with their backs against the wall, because people will say, I don't like horror movies and I don't like musicals. She was able to surpass all those obstacles, those hindrances, those things that keep people like, I don't know if I want to watch this movie. And they were able to see the artistry. Some of the most beautiful shots I've ever seen in cinema is presented in Sinners. The big Oscar-nominated song, I Lied to You, the way it's shot and it goes through the room, through all the different musical elements throughout history, that is magic on a level that you don't get to see, and Autumn Durald Arkapaw is recognized for that.
I didn't know if it was going to work, if it was going to fit. I didn't even know if it fit the script, but it ended up starting off the movie, and it ended up being such an important piece of music.
Yes, I lied to you.
I always wanted to write a blues song, so I thought if I said, they say the truth hurts, so I lied to you. I love the blues. And I didn't know that was Miles Canton's, Sam's character, that he was sort of lying to his dad about where he was going. I didn't know any of that, so I really have to believe that the ancestors sort of just told me what to say.
Costume designer Ruthie Carter is no stranger to the Winner's Walk. She's already won 2 statuettes for work she did with Coogler on both Black Panther films.
Ryan Coogler, together we are reshaping how culture is represented.
This nomination marks her 5th, the most for any Black woman in any category in Oscars history.
I like the room to feel like the environment that we're creating. So I put inspiration pictures everywhere. Stack was much more tailored to the body, with all the accoutrements, collar bar, tie bar, pocket watch, cufflinks, and Smoke was a little bit more everyman. So he had the denim cap. He had a little bit less self-conscious of a fit because he had to carry a holster with 2 guns underneath his jacket.
I've been hearing about this one particular young man all day. I pretty much, once again, trusted what Ruth would bring to me, but the clothing that Ruth Carter had selected, that we had agreed I would wear, absolutely was already breathing life into me.
Congratulations.
Veteran actor Delroy Lindo finally receives his first Oscar nomination.
Delroy Lindo.
What's interesting about hearing how audiences are responding to the work, you know, you get in a scene, you get on set, and you're in a scene, and you communicate the dialogue, and you work, and you live, and you breathe with whomever it is that your colleagues are, and you do, hopefully, what the story requires.
The Vampires is different.
Another first-time nominee from the stellar cast is Nigerian-British actress Wunmi Mosaku.
I mean, I can't help but be just joyful at this moment. I can't believe I get to celebrate and be included in, and it's just, in this moment, it's just incredible.
And for writer, producer, and director Coogler, he could take home as many as 3 gold statuettes.
You know, everybody put their heart and soul into it. So, you know, what the audience is reacting to, that final finished thing, you know, yes, I wrote the screenplay, yes, I directed it, but they're reacting to all of that. You know, they're reacting to contributions of hundreds of serious artists and craftspeople.
Following the recent actor awards,
you are shining herald of Michael B. Jordan.
The question now is, will these big wins turn into Oscar gold?
This ride has been unbelievable, so thank you for welcoming me in and making me feel seen.
I'll be live from outside the Dolby Theater in Hollywood, co-hosting On the Red Carpet at the Oscars, which starts at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time Sunday, March 15th on ABC, and streaming on ABC News Live, followed by the 98th Academy Awards at 7 p.m. Eastern on ABC and streaming live on Hulu. That is our show for this hour. I'm Lindsay Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Good night.